All right, reviewing last week's Bible study topic, we talked about idolatry and how it impacts our lives. I'm going to start by reading Romans 1:21 through 23-ish. For they knew God, but they did not glorify him as God or show gratitude. Instead, their thinking became nonsense, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. I think that in many aspects of our lives, we are made to worship, of course, and worship God, but instead we fill that with something else, Christians and non-Christians alike. So I want to draw some comparisons or at least some connections between what I think is happening to America's mental health and probably the reason in that we are seeking truth in all the wrong places. So we're going to talk about the dangers of idolizing certain things, from wealth and entertainment to phones, and we'll explore how these obsessions can have significant consequences on our lives. I want to read something real quick though from the CDC just to paint this picture. I've got some of the statistics behind me, both financial and mental health, but I like to key in on the younger demographic. The CDC paints a deeply concerning picture. Nearly 3 out of 5, and we're going to talk about high school girls here for a second, in the United States surveyed reported persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness in 2021, marking a staggering 60% increase over the past decade. While both high school girls and boys reported experiencing mental health challenges, girls in particular reported record high levels of sexual violence, sadness, and suicide risk, according to the CDC. A shocking 57% of high school girls reported enduring persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness in the past year, a stark contrast to the 36% reported in 2011. More chilling, 3 out of 10 girls admit to seriously considering attempting suicide, a substantial leap from 19% in 2011. And again, boys are impacted as well, but this mental health concern that we're seeing in America is not just the youth, also adults. But I like to bring up the youth because I think it's all near and dear to our heart. You know, America's youth is our future. So what does this say? I think because of the nihilistic secular worldview that America holds right now, that existence came from evolution, and that we're all just chance and circumstance, and because there is nothing else out there, then there is no purpose. And with no purpose, where do I find value in meaning? And because we're intended to worship God, and without that, we start to worship other things like self, money, sex, entertainment. So let's talk about those and see what you think. First thing we talked about Sunday was worshiping identity. What does it look like if we put ourselves as the center? And I actually should wait and use this one last because I think this is where we're really at, is everybody worshiping themselves. You're obsessed with your image, your economic and social status. Those obsessions lead to pride, selfishness, isolation, insecurity, and shallow relationships. I truly think that this is what would boil it down to me is, Genesis 3, the serpent says, you can be like God. And so the sales pitch here is that you are God if you want to be. And that's where I think you see so much, identity crisis in America, especially with our youth, and this gender confusion, and what can we do with it? Can I be a woman today and a man tomorrow? Can I use some chemicals and some surgeries to decide if I was a boy or a girl? That kind of identity crisis comes from idolatry, worshiping us. And I also think this is with abortion. You are sacrificing a child to the God of me, because right now this child doesn't fit in my lifestyle. So I think that worshiping self is actually probably the more prevalent of the others. And you're going to see the others follow suit as far as, the money, worshiping money becomes self-serving, worshiping comfort becomes self-serving. But worshiping identity, I think, is where we're the root of all evil, is the pride and making it a universe of me. Discussed what idolatry of money would look like. Those are obsessed, who are obsessed with money, are obsessed with wealth accumulation, material possessions, financial comparison, the who's who, and financial security. And I think I fall into this sometimes. So even as a Christian, I've got to safeguard myself. I want a good retirement, and I want my kids to have a good life. But at the same time, if those things become the number one, that's when it's a problem. See, none of these things actually are bad. The devil borrows all the good from God and then twists them. Self, we talked about the idolatry of self. Well, we're made in the image of God. That's a good thing. But if we begin to worship ourselves, make us the center of things, that's the bad thing. Money is not bad. Money's a tool. But if you put it as number one, then again, the devil can use that and twist it into things like greed, materialism. It's going to result in stress and anxiety, broken relationships, and you're probably willing, if money is the number one, to lie, cheat, and steal from others to get ahead, and lack of fulfillment. So you'll find people who are focused on money. These are the results of that idolatry. Entertainment was the next one we talked about. People obsessed with entertainment, and entertainment in and of itself is not bad. But if it becomes your number one, if you are a thrill seeker, then you're going to be obsessed with constant consumption, possibly celebrity worship, escapism, validation, and popularity. And these things lead to escapism, which I think is pretty interesting. So escapism is essentially trying to get out of reality. Like, I don't like my real life maybe, and I'm escaping to this imaginary or fictitious life that I can lead. It's going to lead to mismanagement of time, shallow relationships, emotional dependency, unrealistic expectations, right? And in some cases, worshiping entertainment and seeing some of these celebrities and their lifestyles they live makes us that comparison game. My life isn't as cool or as great. And because of that, I have unrealistic expectations on my wife, my marriage, my children, because we should be so much better and greater than we are. Reduced productivity, right? Because if I'm spending all this time in this escapism, in this surreal reality, then I'm not living my life. So worshiping entertainment is definitely an idol that can lead us down a bad road. Next up for idolatry is sex. I don't think that anybody could deny that sex is huge in America, in the world right now. A lot of things are sexualized. And that, again, sex is a gift from God. That's a beautiful thing between a man and his wife. But what has the devil done with the gift of sex? He's twisted that into some very perverted things. Those obsessed with sex, what does that look like? Promiscuity, sexualizing everything. That leads to addiction and pornography, and then constant sexual thoughts. This will lead to STDs, health problems, emotional disconnect, addiction, relationship issues, reduced self-worth, and then I think unwanted pregnancy, which results in probably murder, right? The child sacrifice to the God of me again. So sex is an idol that we can put up on a shelf. Now, is sex good? Yes. God intended it to be that way, a gift to us. But if we make it the number one thing in our life, that's what we're seeking. Everything else has to come second. Then it becomes our idol. What about the idol of comfort? What does that look like? Those obsessed with avoidance of discomfort, like everything has to be easy. I don't like going through anything hard. I wouldn't want to go to the gym and get sweaty because that would be tough on me. Complacency, luxury and convenience. We're obsessed with escapism, again, trying to get out of the true reality. This leads to stagnation, like I'm never going to improve in my life. I'm going to just plateau. It's going to lead to dependency, health issues, obviously, if I'm stagnant all the time, emotional issues. I can't handle the tough. I'm mentally soft, relationship strain, and missed opportunity, because those who are constantly comfort seeking won't go out and take those challenges. Maybe it's a hike or whitewater rafting, but you're going to avoid those things because you don't want to get wet or hot or cold so comfort. While it is, obviously we live much more comfortably today than they did in the Old Testament. But if we are worshiping that comfort, then we won't want to, venture outside, do anything new at all. Phones. Now, we don't worship in America, I don't think, wooden idols, maybe like they did. We don't have Asherah poles or worship Baal. But I think you'd be surprised. I think Baal would get pretty jealous at how much time we spend with our phones. Those obsessed with phones, the constant connectivity, app and game addiction, virtual validation, seeking approval through Instagram or Facebook, and the fear of missing out. So we don't want, if our friends are doing something, we want to somehow be involved in that. Snap me or Snapchat back and forth. This leads to reduced productivity. We're all the time on our phone and not actually living our real lives. Isolation, you're pulling back from friend groups. Mental health issues, physical health concerns, and reduced real-world engagement. And I think you're seeing a lot of this. Even in the youth, as far as like, shaking a hand firm and looking me in the eye when we talk, a lot of that because they're not used to those type of social skills. You're seeing a big gap in that. So do we worship our phones? I think so. I saw a statistic that said that the average person checks their phone 150 times in a day. That seems like a lot to me. I think if we checked in with God 150 times a day, that would be pretty cool. So again, anytime we elevate something above our relationship with God, that becomes our idol. We all are trying to achieve or rack up certain accolades. I like to bring in King Solomon here. So King Solomon was King David's son, and he was a heck of a guy. As a matter of fact, he was the wisest man to ever live. God granted him that. So as we try to build our kingdoms and build ourselves up, I'd like to just take a minute to compare us, to what King Solomon did and how can we get close to that. I increased my achievements, and he was king for 40 years. He also built God's temple. In one instance, he sacrificed 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep. If we put him in today's time, King Solomon would be worth $2 trillion. As far as the love of others or chasing that sexual idol, King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Of course, he was the wisest man. In 1 Kings 3:12 talks about that. But the section in green right here I want to point to, and he says, and this is King Solomon here, saying that everything is futile, a pursuit of the wind. And I think we can learn a lot from reading Ecclesiastes and understanding from the wise King Solomon that no matter what we try to fill, this hole with, it's all going to be for nothing if that hole isn't worshiping God. If we are worshiping, again, ourself, if we're worshiping the things that we can accumulate, if we're worshiping money, if we're worshiping sex, if we're worshiping comfort or our phones, we're going to continue to feel empty and lost, because that's not what that hole is for. That hole is for the Holy Spirit and your relationship with God. Now, at KWI, our Bible studies are not, just for Christians. So it's just a topical issue. And I think that talking about idols and priorities in anyone's life would be an important discussion. So a slide we had was, what is the purpose of eliminating idols in your life? And for Christians, I think it's biblical, it's Christ-like. You're going to give God the glory instead of trying to take it yourself. And overall, I think God's commands are intended for you to live your best life. So God is your father. Just like I'm a father to my son, the reason I tell him or give him tips and tricks, I guess, for life are because I want him to have a better life than I had. I want him to be better than me. I don't think God lists commandments or rules to keep me from having fun. What he's looking at is for me to have the best life I can here and to serve him in doing so. Non-Christians, why would you want to eliminate idols from your life? I think it's financially responsible that you're not chasing material things. Delayed gratification is good. That creates self-control and discipline. You'll have low stress, freedom from debt and slavery, reduced mental and health issues. And again, I think all of these things add up to living your best life idol-free. I always include the gospel in the Sunday Bible study. And so really quick, the 4 points of the gospel are that there is a God that created us. And because he created us, we owe him. He is our moral and ethical law giver. We sinned against him. That sin separates us from God. And the Old Testament speaks to ways that are symbolic in how we could get back to God. Unfortunately, the Ten Commandments expose our sin and that we fall short. So now you got to scratch your head. If there is no way to get back to God because we are sinful beings, how can we ever create a right relationship with the creator of the universe? Well, it just so happens that he stepped into time and history in the flesh of his son, Jesus Christ, and he took the punishment for us on the cross, taking our sins away. But God does give us free will. And so point number 4 we talk about is choice. You have a choice to make. If you will put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, then you can be reunited with God. If you choose not to, then you are electing to take the judgment yourself for your sins, and God will let you do that. That is what free will is. Wrapping up at the end of the Bible study, I always hit James 1:22. Be doers of the word, not just hearers, lest you deceive yourself. I call it the homework verse. What are we going to do with the discussion we just had? And hopefully we're going to reduce the idolatry in our life, Christian and non-Christian alike. Point 1, we are created to worship. So I hope you choose God instead of money or self or sex or comfort. Number two, I'd like to point out that I think the nihilistic worldview that we currently have in America leads us to idolatry because we don't think there's a God, and instinctively we're creations that desire to worship something. We're going to fill that, and that void will be filled with those created idols, not the Creator. In the end, we worship self, the creation, which leaves us empty because we let ourselves down. This emptiness leads to chaos, both mental and physical issues, and that's where I think you see our society breaking down right now. If you're not a Christian today, I would challenge you to think about which worldview sounds better. I consider myself to be physically and mentally happy. I'm not bragging on myself, but I think that putting my faith and trust in the God that created me and finding worth and self purpose in the fact that I'm created in the image of God and that He loved me so much that He came and died for me so that I could be reconciled and reunited with Him. If that's all a lie, I think I'm still better for it. So I would challenge you to weigh those options, because if it isn't a lie, then it's the most important decision you'll ever make in your life, because your eternity depends on it. We brought up Genesis one more time, Genesis 3, with verse 5, the serpent said to the woman, in fact, God knows that when you eat, your eyes will be open and you will be like God. The devil is constantly trying to convince us that we can be God. And that's what I think you see in today's youth, especially with this transgender and gender ideology, deciding what I am. God already did that. You were made in His image. You were already made male or female. What do you do with that is your free will, but you don't have the free will to create what it is you are. Galatians 4, 8, and 9 warn us about being enslaved to idols and how it makes you weak and bankrupt. Romans 1, 21 through 23, that's where I started this, and I think it's a great way to end. That is, instead their thinking became nonsense, and their senseless minds were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools. So don't be a fool. Don't worship the creation. Don't look to the idols of identity, of money, of entertainment, of sex, of comfort, of iPhones. Seek out the God of the universe, and you'll find purpose and meaning in life in Jesus Christ.